So we left off December 9th, 2019. I was alone at home. I had just had the most miserable time ever at the OBGYN getting CT scans, ultrasounds, and now I'm waiting for the phone call and you come home.
Thanks so much again for joining us on another episode of Family 412. We're picking up right from where we left off on our last episode where you didn't feel right. Something
Nope.
was clearly wrong. You had been feeling pretty bad for a couple weeks and you wanted some answers.
I did, and I was hoping for answers in this phone call that the gynecologist said she'd be going over my results from the CT scan that day.
So if you haven't watched the first video, I encourage you to go back and do that. That way you can follow along with the story.
Yeah, please. It's too much of a story to do in one long video, so we split it up in two. So it saves us some time, and you.
So it's late in the day on Monday. I get home from work, and I have, up to this point, I have very limited information as to what's going on. We had only communicated for a few minutes during the day when you had called me, but I knew you were at the hospital, you were getting tests done, you had your appointments, but I had no idea. You still had no idea what it actually was.
Exactly. We kind of knew about the same at that point because we didn't get any answers because they didn't have any answers to give, or at least they were being very careful to not overgive information.
And then it's about 5:30 in the evening, and the call comes.
It does. And Riker's there. He's only 6 years old at that time. And it was a hard phone call. It wasn't long. She just let me know that there was indeed a mass and they believe it is cancer.
So she did use the C word then.
She did.
Yeah.
And she didn't say what strain it could be. She alluded that it might be ovarian because of the location of where the mass was. It looked like it was on my ovary. It could have been around the one ovary. They didn't know specifics. It was just based on the ultrasound and CT scan at this point. So they were saying that there will be more tests. They're going to be evaluating things. Because of the size of the mass, it might involve surgery. There might be chemo. They really were going all over in possibilities of what could happen.
What was going through your mind as all this was happening?
I said to you later, it was just the image of you being a single dad. And
I remember that.
That was what I just grasped in that moment, where I'm not a negative person. I'm a very, silver lining person. But in that moment, I could just see all the horror stories of other ladies with cancer in their 30s, how usually cancer at that time is a life sentence, from what experience I had heard up to that point.
Or worse, a death sentence.
Well, that's, yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I mean. Life sentence, death sentence. Yeah, where it's the rest of your life and ending.
And that was only the first call.
That was.
There was a second call that came maybe an hour after that. I'm ready to go to, I volunteered at a free medical clinic on Monday nights, and it was going to be one of the last times that I visited there because we were moving in a couple weeks.
Right.
And then another call comes in.
Right, but you had stayed home.
Yeah, I didn't even go.
Yeah, it's because
we didn't know what was going on.
It was such a messed up situation. We woke up that morning not expecting to go to bed that night with this information. But it was the second phone call that actually changed everything. I was still a mess. I remember answering it thinking that it had to do with all of this. And sure enough, it did. It was another lady who I had never met. She worked at the hospital and she had looked at my CT scans. And she opened up saying who she was. I can't remember her role. And she asked, "What have you been told?" And I told her, I said, well, the gynecologist had just called and she said it's probably cancer, and we're going to have to evaluate things going forward. And she really didn't have many answers, but she really feels the worst. And
now, was this when you were told that you were bleeding internally?
Exactly. So
that was the big reason I actually didn't believe, because
yes,
internal bleeding is life-threatening.
It is, and that's what this lady said. She said, hold up. Based on these CT scans, yes, it could be cancer, but I'm not going to jump the gun. I believe that this mass is you filling up with liquid, filling up with blood, internal bleeding, and it's spreading. And you could actually die in the next 24 to 48 hours from this. You need emergency surgery. And we just went from being in the pits of despair to anxiety 2.0, where we didn't know what to do. We're like, okay, should we go to the emergency room right now? And she said, if you're not spiking a fever, and she went over.
You were stable enough at that time that we didn't have to do that.
She went over different symptoms, and thank God I didn't have those emergency symptoms. So we scheduled to go
the next day
to Danville we thought it was going to be surgery right then.
Yeah.
And they evaluated me and determined I was stable enough to have surgery the first thing Wednesday morning. So they just did all of the pre-surgery, I forget, like it was...
the pre-surgery, prep and all that.
All the different prep. And
give you the instructions on how to care for yourself before.
Yeah, I wasn't allowed to eat in the next...
And we're still...
several hours, yeah.
Especially me, I'm like, okay, she's internally bleeding. There's nothing I could do about this. And we're still having to wait yet another about 24 hours for this thing to happen, the surgery to happen.
And meanwhile... I continue to
get bigger and bloat.
It was extremely painful. I came in and I remember the staff being amazed. They're like, you must have the highest pain tolerance ever. I'm like, well, I did give birth. It was painful, but it wasn't anything like giving birth without meds.
Yeah.
So it was a surreal time.
Yeah.
Where we didn't know the future. And there was a lot of different, it was doctor-patient conversations, nurse-patient conversations, where they went over the worst-case scenarios, if I didn't make it off the table. And if I had to have a full hysterectomy was one of the conversations that was had. And that was extremely hard, talking about the possibilities of early menopause and not having any more kids.
Right.
And that was, I think, even though, yes, it's a life or death situation, that was the hardest part of the realization where my body would forever be changed, no matter what the outcome, what the circumstances of what happened during that surgery, I would be forever changed.
So the surgery scheduled for Wednesday, and you were okay. You were stable all of the rest of Tuesday night, and getting up Wednesday, and you go in for surgery Wednesday morning. I want to say it was, and I'm by myself. There's nobody there with me, so I'm in a hospital that I've never been in. Riker was with my parents. And I want to say it was about a 2.5 hour surgery or so. It was kind of long.
It was long, yeah.
I
don't remember any of it.
You don't remember any of it?
Yeah.
That's a good thing, I guess. The anesthesia was working well.
Yeah.
But the surgeon had come down and talked to me after the surgery, kind of explaining what happened. And they said they removed the mass, no more internal bleeding. But he couldn't still specifically say. They were sending the mass to pathology,
and it was 17 centimeters, which is a giant grapefruit.
That's what, about 6.5 inches maybe?
6 3/4 of an inch.
You did the math.
Yeah.
But it was very large, and they had no idea what it was exactly. So, and it was something where he had never seen anything like that in all of his time too, and he was very experienced. So you baffled the medical world in that day.
It made me laugh because I seem to baffle a lot of people in my unique ways, and that was definitely a pinnacle point.
So you're in recovery, and I remember I don't think you remember this because you were coming out of the anesthesia, and all I could think about is, besides your recovery, of course, that was most important first and foremost, but we're moving in 11 days. We're supposed to be leaving. And I just remember in the recovery area reading Psalm 37 out loud to you. That's one of your favorites, yeah. Psalm 37:4.
Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart.
And He was in our journey moving down to South Carolina. But I know you don't remember any of that, but
no.
Stayed through the day at the hospital all of Wednesday, stayed overnight Wednesday, was very closely monitored, and you were in a lot of pain, of course.
Yeah, they actually recommended us staying another night, but we could not get a wink of sleep that first night.
It was tough, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't in a one and only room. We had to share the room, and the other person did not sleep and didn't allow us to sleep.
That's okay, and it wasn't intentional. It's a stressful situation. It's tough, but
it was like I couldn't imagine having another sleepless night there.
I agree. So we get home Thursday evening, and you're still in tremendous pain. You just had a major organ removed. What did they actually determine happened?
So there were still a lot of questions, and we were still going to be waiting for phone calls. But one thing they did say was the reason it was so large and there had been so many different symptoms that had clued me in to the existence of that mass was that my ovary was twisted. And they said that the mass wasn't just whatever was in that mass that they had taken, were going to be doing tests on. It was also my left ovary. The whole thing was in there. So it was the twist that had caused the bloating, it had caused the absence of the time of the month, and it had caused the evidence that something was wrong. It did not cause the mass, but God used that fall to help me know what was the matter. And I found out even more of how much a miracle that was when I finally got the call of the findings of the pathology. And they indicated that it indeed was cancer. And it wasn't just any kind of cancer. And this is why they were stumped. It was extremely rare. So rare that no one on staff had ever seen it before. None of the neighboring hospitals had ever seen it before. And the entirety of 2020, when I had my follow-up appointments, they had never seen anyone that had it before.
But as rare as that was, you do know someone who has had it.
Yep. My own family.
Yeah.
So I found out that, and this was another blessing, that if I was to have a genetic marker for a cancer, I had one living grandparent at that time, and she's still living, my grandmother Fumiko, my mom's mom. And she had the cancer I had in her 30s. And she had experienced it in Japan, and she had it in her left ovary and right ovary, both of them.
And this was after children?
This was after children. And this was that's another thing. And this is a very complex story of a lot of different elements. And so when I found out that this genetic marker was what had happened to me, it had nothing to do with my diet. It had nothing to do with stress levels that I had at that time, although I'm sure it didn't help. And it wasn't me that had caused it. This was a gene marker that was there, and it had grown, and It was hereditary, and I had wished I had known before that week because I probably would have gotten regular checkups at the OBGYN to make sure nothing had happened. But it was a very aggressive cancer. And if that ovary had not been twisted, if those symptoms had not been prevalent, I would not be sitting here. I know I wouldn't be. Because it was very aggressive. It's a very high vitality rate for when you don't catch it. However, when you do catch it, it's a very high success rate or very high living
Life expectancy.
Yes.
Well, your grandmother is how old?
She's
90.
96.
Wow.
Yeah, 96. Yeah. And still going strong. And so that's what I had found out.
What now, because you touched on this earlier, what happens now? Does that pretty much solidify our family of 3?
Yeah. You know, I wish it was that cut and dry. And that was an issue. That was such an issue, and it was so frustrating because we didn't get that answer. Because that hospital knew no one. Because the neighboring hospitals knew no one. Because when we finally moved here, I saw 2 different doctors, and they knew no one. No one could give us a direct answer when I asked, can I have kids?
I do remember the nurse practitioner that was on staff at the hospital who had kind of seen you through this process. And she had said, are you planning on having any more?
Right.
I wouldn't recommend it in so
Exactly.
many words.
And that's really the only answer we would be given is, I don't know, but I wouldn't recommend it. Which, it's still not an answer.
No.
A lot of people be like, oh, I can still I'm going to risk it. And there was definitely part of me that wanted to risk it. I'm like, okay, I still have one of my ovaries. I still have my uterus. They were very concerned that the cancer had spread to the uterus. And I was very highly monitored all of 2020. And it was the second doctor I went to. He was very open and honest, and I appreciated that, where he said, 90% of reoccurrences happen in this first year, and we need to monitor you continually. And they had recommended chemo for just in case they hadn't gotten anything. And us being us, we weren't big on chemo, and especially if it was a just in case. And we noticed as I was getting blood work every couple months, I think I have permanent bruises on my arms. I still get blood work now just once a year because it's a great indicator. And we just watched it going down. And if it had stayed the same or gone up, I would have had chemo. But praise God, it not only went down, it went completely normal within the first, I think it was 6 months. I was reading normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They had got it all.
In a couple weeks, it'll be 6 years that you are cancer free and continue to remain that way.
Praise God, yes.
So the story ends where we were able to move. We were able to move. I mean, you weren't able to help much in the moving process. You couldn't lift anything heavy. They also advised that you didn't drive for 2 weeks, but...
Well, they did clear. It was 10
I think it was
days.
10, 11 days, yeah.
Yeah, they said, okay, we'll allow it.
But, you had no issues at all. We made the 10.5-hour drive down here, and cars packed, and we kept an open phone line, and
I really just have a giant scar, and that's the remnants. And then, of course, I can't really say inability to have more kids, but there's still that. So it took them 5 years to give me an answer.
And what was the...
I think it was 5 years, right? January of 2024. Right. So I have an amazing gynecologist now, and she actually did her research in finding someone in Brown University that is studying the type of cancer I had. Oh, I didn't say what type of cancer I had, actually. I had a yolk sac germ cell tumor. And it's the type of cancer that will usually attack the reproductive organs.
Mm.
And so that type of tumor was actually studied by my gynecologist. I think it was a friend of hers at Brown University. And she asked them about my question, am I able to have kids? And I finally got an answer January 2024. And the answer was most likely, but I would not recommend it.
So kind of, so in 5 years, we really didn't get very far. The answer was still the same. It's not recommended.
It's not recommended. And especially, I'm still young, but I'm in my late 30s. And so I'm technically the higher risk anyway. And they just said that if we were to choose this, they don't know how it would go. And I would need to be very closely monitored, because it wasn't that they didn't, it came out, it wasn't that they didn't know of anyone that had the tumor I had. They didn't know of anyone that had kids after having the tumor I had. And if you're seeing this and if you've had that type of tumor and have had kids after, I would love to hear from you, seriously. But no one in the medical field that I have had contact with has ever had that. And my grandmother, who I know personally, she had her 3 kids prior to having it. So, and I think a lot of times it does result in a full hysterectomy. So I'm one of the rare ones that didn't have to do that. I might choose to do it one day just out of peace of mind, but I don't have to have it done right now.
So the option of having more kids is all but off the table. But
at the same time, there's no clear answer.
Yes,
And I do wish there was a clear answer, but sometimes we don't have that in life. It would be so much easier if it was a, yes, you can do it, or no, you can't do it. But it made this a very difficult decision for us. And praise God, we have people in our lives that I was able to have some very good, deep conversations with. A lot of them are also only child parents, and they face different similar situations where they had to make a choice. Do we pursue a second child at the detriment of my own body, which in turn could either create a single parent scenario or a risk scenario where they're not there for the child that's present? And God really spoke to me, like, how important is it to have that adventure of that pursuing the second child? Is it to the detriment of our son? Is he not having me in it? And it's a struggle, because so I had an idea that in my head about wanting those 4 kids. And we're still young. I could still bear children. We don't know for a fact. It doesn't look like it.
But at what cost?
At what cost? Mm-hmm. So the 4 kid scenario most likely won't happen. Nothing is impossible for God. We're just being realistic. And knowing that it's a struggle, but there's also that embracing, is this what God intends for us? Because our plans are not his plans.
So with another child naturally pretty much out the window, there could be another option, isn't there?
Right. There's lots of different alternatives, and we definitely pursued one in a lot of details.
I believe on the previous video, I think it was the previous video, we were talking about children. We had alluded to the fact that we were both interested in adopting.
Right.
And
I think
that
we've alluded.
that is a whole nother story in itself, like you said.
Yes.
We were actually not always a family of 3. For a very short time, a few years ago, we were a 4-member family.
We were. And it was a lot shorter of a time period than we thought.
I think we'll touch on that, or dive pretty deep into it, I think, in the next video.
We are prayerfully trying to figure out how much of our complex adoption story we want to go into.
We'll see. Thank you so much for listening to Laura's story. It's a very unique and one-of-a-kind story, I think.
It is, but God had so many miracles along the way. He really did. And we're better for it.
Yeah, and if you've been through anything like this, had a family member or knew somebody that went through what Laura did, we'd like to hear from you, because it was very rare what you experienced.
It was, and I would love to talk more about it, because it's a testimony. I'm 6 years cancer-free and counting.
That's right. Thanks so much. We hope you'll join us on the next video. Hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you again soon.
Take care.